The traditional dates for the life of Muhammad don't seem to line up with the most current historical research. When did the apostasy and conquest wars really happen? Let's start exposing these major historical problems with the standard Islamic narrative. Well, hello everyone. This is Al Fadi, and I want to welcome you to another video series that we will be doing with our dear brother, Mel. And as you know, of course, the minute I mention Mel, we are dealing with the standard Islamic narrative and issues related to the origin of Islam. And today's topic is no different. It might take us few episodes to cover, but it focuses also on yet another contradiction between what we call the standard Islamic dating and discoveries that appears to go against those datings. In fact, in this case, we are going to be talking about dating for certain conquests, Islamic conquests, and also the war of the apostates or the apostasy war. And we will shed a little bit light on that. But before I do so, I want to welcome our dear friend Mel to the studio. Mel, thank you so much as always for being here with us.
My pleasure to be back. It seems like years since I was last talking to you. I think this is going to be a really key series for our audience, because I think it's really important for us to get definite dates about when these things happened.
Right.
And then we can talk about all the other periphery stuff. But once we get the dating correct, then we can start to unpack it. But I think the three main things that's really important is, when did Muhammad die, according to standard Islamic narrative? Well, he's said to have died in 632, and secondly, the Ridda Wars are meant to have happened after that because they lost faith in his movement, according to the narrative. And then there was the conquests in Iraq, which are meant to have happened in 633 AD, so basically a year after he died. The problem is, what happens if the dating is wrong with those Iraqi conquests?
Right.
If those years are wrong, where does that leave us with the Ridda Wars and with the proposition that Muhammad died in 632? And if Muhammad didn't die in 632, what else is wrong with the story of Muhammad? Well, as we've seen in many other videos, there's actually quite a lot wrong with that narrative.
Right.
But this is a key aspect of it.
Yes, absolutely, and I agree with you. I mean, if Muhammad didn't die in 632, then who died in 632? Or if they missed the dating of Muhammad's basically death, what about his birth? There are some inscriptions that indicate his birth was in 570. It would have been earlier. And there are also some discoveries like the Birmingham folios, for instance. It indicates that the dating of those folios and the Quran would have been much earlier even than the birth of Muhammad. So now people are beginning to see why the dating is extremely important, because there is a lot on the line when it comes to that. For instance, you mentioned the Ridda Wars, which is the Arabic way or the Islamic way of saying the apostasy war. What was it about? Well, here is what I learned growing up, that after the death of Muhammad, certain people from certain tribes left Islam altogether, became apostates, murtaddeen basically. And there is another, a false prophet by the name of Musaylima al-Kadhab, the liar. And he apparently also was one of those people that attracted certain people to follow him, or even was fighting against the traditional Muslims. So Abu Bakr and Omar were concerned really about that. And Abu Bakr in particular wanted to go, technically speaking, and send troops to fight people and force them to come back to Islam. Believe it or not, it wasn't just to bring him back to the fold of Islam. It was about paying the zakah. I mean, the charity. You can see that there is a financial or economical motivation behind it. And also, if you want to take the traditional Islamic dating also seriously, it was during that time that Umar advised supposedly Abu Bakr to start the first collection of the Quran, or the first compilation. So everybody can see that there is important events that were happening, and we're using dates that apparently now, today, and in the next few episodes, we'll show you that some of the discoveries and archaeological discoveries and datings and historical writings do not line up with them. So, Mel, what do we have this time? What are we going to look at to begin to examine the traditional date versus the dates that we are uncovering?
Okay, so I suppose a key document is Saif ibn Umar's book. He wrote in the 8th century. He was an Islamic historian and compiler of reports, and he wrote a book which in English is called The Great Book of Conquest and Apostasy Wars, hence the title. Another very important book is actually written by an Iranian scholar called The Decline and Fall of the Sasanian Empire. Her name is Parvana Pourshariati. It's a very long book. It took me the whole summer to go through it, and it's very in depth. And so the basic principle that she put forward is, okay, Saif mentions these battles in Iraq, and he gives some markers that by which we can date the different battles. For example, he mentions the names of different Persian rulers. Now, it so happens that there are Iranian sources that we can look at, and we can date when those rulers existed. And by that, we can date the battles. So she looked at the Hijra dates given by Saif and basically said, well, these dates are wrong. So she basically decided to ignore those dates and then just look at the other indicators and work out dates just based on the Persian rulers that are mentioned in the story. And it's very logical. And so that's the evidence that we're drawing from. And she
Right.
makes a fantastic case.
And also,
Um,
want to mention, she is from the region, so we ought to really at least respect the fact that she will have her firsthand look on what transpired in her own region.
Yeah, and just to kind of point out, she's a 20th century or 21st century scholar. She is doing work that very few other scholars have done. A lot of scholars have neglected all the Persian narratives, and so she's really kind of doing the work that needed to be done centuries ago, really. So just to draw our attention to this slide here, this is from her book. She says that Saif's account of the initial phase of the conquest of Iraq begins with a very significant chronological and symbolic indicator. When Khalid bin Walid was done with the business of Yamama, Abu Bakr, 632 to 634, wrote to him, "Go onward toward Iraq until you enter it. Begin with the gateway to India, which is Ubula or Basra. Render the people of Persia and those nations under their rule peaceable." Now, Yamama was where Khalid had defeated the Sudu prophet Musaylima. The signifier at the very inception of Saif's account, therefore, is the Ridda Wars conducted under the direction of Abu Bakr, which is exactly what you just mentioned. So these battles in Iraq happened just after the Ridda Wars. So let's go a little bit further. She says that the accepted Hijra chronology provided by Saif, moreover, puts the start of these wars in 12 AH, conventionally dated to 633 CE. Okay, the problem is that that doesn't line up. So the rulers mentioned in Saif's books, some of them were dead by 633. They were no longer rulers, so there's something up. So she ignores the AH and just focuses on, as we said, getting the dating sorted and then seeing where the cards fall, you know. So an earlier dating for the Iraqi battles will be a problem, as these Iraqi battles occur supposedly after Muhammad's death and the Ridda Wars. If they occurred several years earlier than previously thought, where does that leave us with the standard Islamic narrative? I'm going to suggest that it actually leaves us with a massive crater in the standard Islamic narrative, because this particular period is a pivotal period if we're talking about the death of Muhammad and the Ridda Wars. So here are the first 7 battles that she delves into. As you can see, the battles start way down in the southeast of Iraq, and well, what would be called Kuwait, really. So we have like the Battle of Ubula, which is Basra, and then nearby the Battle of Dat al-Salasil and so forth. And then the battles head sort of northwest up along the Euphrates River. and then even further off the map here. So these places are fairly familiar. You'll probably recognize up in the north there, Baghdad. What the Sind claims is that these battles happened between 633 and 634. However, by referencing Persian monarchs at the time of the battles, we can cross-reference the time of their reigns and bingo, discover an accurate date for each battle. And spoiler alert, they didn't occur between 633 and 634. There's no surprise in that. I don't know if you want to come in on any of that.
No, I was just going to say it's just when you look at all of these battles and the fact that they were all sandwiched between just 633 and 634, it's just amazing because I grew up also believing that Muhammad himself did send a letter to Qusra, or the Caesar of the Persian Empire, asking him to accept Islam. And of course, it was laughed at and rejected. So it kind of makes you wonder now if those battles took place before 632, just by virtue of looking at this concept of Muhammad approaching, Caesar himself with the letter.
Yeah. So I was initially very skeptical of all of these battles. I didn't think there was any historical truth to these because so much is exaggerated. The dating was wrong, but when I became aware of the fact that there was all of these Persian narratives that lined up with the Arabian or Arab narratives, obviously the Hijra dating was wrong, but certainly the Persian leaders lined up in both narratives, I was more convinced by it. So if we look at the first battle, that's of relevance that we will look in this part today. The Sind places it in 633, and Pur Shariati says, now these raids, as they're called, are described on the year 12 of the Hijra and are said to have been directed by Abu Bakr after the defeat of Musaylama. Who were the Persian commanders participating in the Battle of Ubola, however, and what are the Sasanian chronological indicators for this battle? In other words, who were the Persian leaders, and can we date the time of the battle using that information? So we can actually check the dates of their reigns. She says that during the course of this war, Khalid wrote to Hormuz and urged him to become a Muslim or opt to pay the jizya. At the receipt of Khalid's letter, Hormuz sent the news to Shiru-Yi, Kubad, and to Ardashir III, after which he mobilized his forces. Now, Ardashir III and Hormuz are both very significant people in particular, and so we can definitely date the battles from them alone. So she goes on to say that unlike Saif's account, where there is confusion as to whether this war took place during Shiru-Yi Kubad's reign, 628, or during his successor, Ardashir III's reign, 628, 630. However, Ibn al-Athir maintains that the Battle of Ubula took place during the reign of Ardashir III. So Ardashir III's reign went from 628 to 630. Immediately, we can see a problem.
Right.
If this battle occurred during his reign, clearly the Sind is wrong. Sind says it happened in 633. It's an open and shut case, really. It had to have happened at least 3 years earlier. So you take your pick. It could be 628, 629, or 630, but certainly not 631.
Right.
Certainly not 627. So that's really kind of significant there.
Wonderful. And I know you did this in parts, so let us know when you're approaching the end of that part, the first one.
Yeah, so almost there. So what she decided is she kind of did a thought experiment, and she said, what would happen, however, if we choose to ignore the Hijra date altogether and presume that these raids in fact did take place around the time when Kubad died and the 7-year-old Ardashir III was enthroned? She compares information about Ardashir III's reign from the Hawade Namag tradition, which is an Iranian tradition, and she found that basically Ardashir ruled for about 1 year and 7 months, so that narrows it down, until Sharvaraz usurped the Sasanian throne on the 27th of April 630. And she says, based on our alternative chronology, therefore, the Battle of Ubula would have taken place any time between September 628 and April 630. And she goes on to say, however, since some of the accounts still mention Kubad, we should conclude that this battle probably took place sometime in 7 AH or 628 CE, or AD as I prefer to say. And so before we go on to part 2, that's where I'll stop today.
Yes,
So
that's wonderful. And I just wanted to ask a quick question, and maybe you can address it next time. I know you and I did another series, and we talked about Omar, a certain Omar who possibly could have been Muhammad. And in there, you did also address something related to the possible Hijra dating. Did you ever compare notes between those discoveries and see if anything will help here?
yes, actually, that would be coming up in part 5. So I explored the idea that maybe Saif is actually telling the truth, that he's saying it happened in 12 AH, but he doesn't mean the 12 AH as we understand it today. He's got a different dating system at the time in the 8th century when he's talking about it.
Yep.
And there are actually 4 really exciting sources that come from the 7th and 8th century, and they go from as far away as Spain to China, these sources that actually indicate that in the early days, Islam believed, well, maybe I should hold out to part 5, but
You're a
they
milder
actually
guy.
had-
Yeah, you are a milder guy than Jay. Jay would have yelled at me and said, Al-Fadi, you are jumping ahead.
So that's coming later. There's a different year. That's all I will say. There's a different year that they believed that it all started, and that's going to be the clincher. So that's coming up in part 5.
Yep. Thank you so much, brother. And of course, we're joking here, but indeed, this is another hook, actually, for people to continue to watch this series to learn about all of that. And as I stated at the beginning of this show, a lot is on the line. I mean, you cannot just ignore this, folks. You have to really take these modern day discoveries and any archaeological discoveries or manuscripts or historical writings very seriously. You cannot just ignore it and say, oh, it doesn't, because it does not really jive or line up with my own traditional dating. Somehow they're wrong and I'm right. No, it doesn't work that way. I mean, even in the Bible, we always put a footnote and say newer manuscripts, earlier manuscript had this word, for instance, or had this phrase. Not that I'm concerned, it doesn't change my faith, but at least we're open about any of these things. My prayer is that our Muslim friends also will reach a point like this and begin to just openly say, okay, well, we had a date, now we have discoveries that helped us adjust the date at least. And we'll take it from there. Thank you as always. And hopefully next time we will continue with this fascinating discussion. Until then, have a blessed day. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, share, and comment. And ring the bell so you will be notified when we release new content. Our mission is to reach Muslims with the gospel of Jesus Christ and help Christians engage with their Muslim neighbors. If you want to join us in this life-changing work, please support us on patreon.com/Sira International, or just click on the link below.